Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the program on this Friday, July 31st. Coming to you live from our studio in Seoul, I'm Sin Se-min. And before we begin, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. President Trump mentions delaying the U.S. presidential election as he struggles to keep his approval rating up, with the U.S. economy tanking by a historic 33% in Q2 amid the country's enormous struggle against the COVID-19. Bouncing back from a virus-triggered rock bottom, South Korea's industrial output rebounds in June for all three sectors: industrial production, retail, and investment. NASA's new Mars rover Perseverance blasts off, heading to the Red Planet on the search for possible ancient alien life. It's the third mission to Mars this year after launches by the UAE and China. With just less than 100 days to go until the U.S. presidential election, President Donald Trump has raised the idea of delaying the vote, citing concerns about mail-in voting. But with the idea rejected by many, he later walked it back, but still insisted that mail-in voting was a terrible idea. Our Kim Jae-hee leading us off.
U.S. President Donald Trump has stepped back from his earlier idea of delaying the November 3rd presidential election, but defended his earlier tweet on it during a daily press briefing Thursday by continuing his verbal assault on mail-in voting.
Do I want to see a date change? No, but I don't want to see a crooked election. This election will be the most rigged election in history.
On his Twitter earlier in the day, President Trump explicitly floated the idea of delaying the election. He said that mail-in voting would make the election inaccurate and fraudulent. This was met by quick opposition from many, including former President Barack Obama. During his eulogy at the funeral of late civil rights leader John Lewis, Obama slammed Trump, but did so without using his name.
Even as we sit here, there are those in power who are doing their darndest to discourage people from voting, even undermining the Postal Service in the run-up to an election that's going to be dependent on mail-in ballots so people don't get sick.
Many U.S. media outlets also pointed out that President Trump has no power to unilaterally delay Election Day, which is enshrined in federal law. It would require an act of Congress to change, including agreement from both the Democrats who control the House and the Republicans who control the Senate. This coming as the U.S. economy posted its largest quarterly decline on record in the second quarter. The Bureau of Economic Analysis said on Thursday that the U.S. economy contracted at an annual rate of 32.9% from April through June, the biggest quarterly drop since records began in 1947. Critics and even some of the president's allies dismissed Trump's words as an attempt to distract the public from the grim economic news. Kim Jae-hee, Arirang News.
As countries around the world grapple against the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus has triggered the worst economic records to the world's major economies, including the U.S. and Germany. The American economy suffered its worst period ever in the second quarter this year, with its GDP falling almost 33%. Our Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken an unprecedented toll on the world economy, with the gross domestic product of the U.S. and Germany recording their steepest declines in history. According to statistics released by the U.S. Commerce Department on Thursday, the country's economy shrank at a 32.9% annual rate during the second quarter. This is the largest quarterly decline since such figures were first documented in 1947. The plunge was far greater than the 10% and 8.4% decline during the second quarter of 1958 and fourth quarter of 2008, respectively. The number of unemployment claims in the country also rose for a second straight week, totaling to 1.4 million as of Thursday. Pundits forecast the economic recovery to be bumpy and uneven until a vaccine is developed. Such news comes as Europe's largest economy, that of Germany, also recorded its largest decline since 1970. During the April to June period, its economy shrunk by 10.1% on quarter as exports and business investment collapsed.
The GDP numbers for the second quarter of 2020 are worse than expected. But to be honest, we did not expect an economic beauty contest anyway. The only thing for now is to leave this second quarter behind us and to move forward. It is up to the fiscal and economic policies to set up the right measures in place. What we have seen until now is not enough. It is not powerful enough. We need a good economic policy.
The plunge far exceeded the previous worst ever recorded performance, a fall of 4.7% in the first quarter of 2009 during the global financial crisis. Experts around the world are looking for signs of recovery during the third quarter, while they believe the rise in the unemployed and limited consumption will impact the speed of an economic recovery. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
And South Korea's overall industrial output bounced back for the first time in 6 months, with manufacturing, service, and investment sectors all seeing a jump from the month before. According to Statistics Korea, the country's overall industrial output soared by 4.2% on month in the month of June. Now, this was largely driven by the manufacturing sector, which saw a 7.2% increase on month, its biggest surge since 2009 on the back of automobiles and semiconductors. Manufacturing exports also saw the biggest on-month increase in 33 years by 9.8% from May's figure. Retail sales saw a slight bump of 2.4%, and facility investment also edged up 5.4%. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has fired fresh criticism at North Korea and China. He reconfirmed Washington's goal of completely denuclearizing North Korea and said the closure of the Chinese consulate in Houston was due to it being, quote, a den of spies. Our Choi Jung-yun with more.
The Trump administration's goal for CVID, or the complete, verifiable, and irreversible dismantlement of Pyongyang's nuclear and missile program, is still valid. That's how U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo responded Thursday to Republican Senator Cory Gardner's question on the regime's denuclearization at a Foreign Relations Committee hearing. Although Pompeo didn't bring up the matter in advance, watchers say it's somewhat unprecedented for a high-level official to speak out publicly on the CVID goal. The U.S. has refrained from using the term since the historic 2018 Singapore Kim-Trump summit, as North Korean parties have been repulsed by the idea. Since then, it's been coined as FFVD, Final Fully Verified Denuclearization of North Korea, which for some time has also been seldomly used by U.S. officials to not anger Kim's regime. In fact, Kim Yo-jong, the influential sister of the regime's leader, made it unofficial earlier this month for the U.S., Japan, and Australia, calling for a definite measures on achieving Pyongyang CVID. Meanwhile, reflecting rising tensions between the world's two largest economies, Pompeo also stressed President Trump's tough line on China, calling them the central threat of our times.
Most importantly, on China, we see the Chinese Communist Party also for what it is, the central threat of our times. Our vigorous diplomacy has helped lead an international awakening to the threat of the CCP. Senators, the tide's turning.
He said the reason for closing down the Houston consulate of China was because it was, quote, a den of spies. He also cited international support for Washington's policies, although he expressed dismay at the number of countries supporting Beijing's new security law for Hong Kong. He added that China's invasion of human rights over ethnic minorities in the western part of the country will face the U.S.'s additional actions. Choi Jung-yun, Arirang News.
The European Union has imposed travel and financial sanctions on a North Korean firm over suspected cyber attacks. North Korea's Chosun Expo was sanctioned on Thursday for carrying out operations to assist cyber warfare, including the 2017 WannaCry ransom attack, which locked down hundreds of thousands of computers across the globe. Now, Russia's military intelligence agency, as well as a Chinese firm, were also added to the list for related cyber activities. It's the first time the EU has made such a decision in response to cyber crimes. And as part of the measure, the assets of 6 individuals and 3 institutions will be frozen, and those involved will be banned from traveling into the EU. Back here in the country, a special cabinet meeting held this morning has given the green light to two bills aimed at bettering tenants' rights. Now, the two bills, one of which is a revision of the Housing Lease Protection Act and the other, revision of the Commercial Building Lease Protection Act, has now gone into effect with the cabinet giving them a go-ahead. So now the new legislation on housing leases will allow tenants to renew their housing lease contracts by up to 2 more years from the first 2 years guaranteed under the current law. It also caps rent increases at 5% when home lease contracts are extended. Now, the revision comes amid public anger over property prices, which have skyrocketed despite repeated attempts to make homes more affordable. 72 South Korean workers from Iraq have come home this morning on a government charter flight as South Korean government evacuates nationals from one of the world's COVID-19 red zones. And upon their arrival, the entrants have now gone under quarantine at a separate gates, and those who show symptoms are also going through testing on site for the virus. Those who are asymptomatic will be transferred to temporary care centers for a 2-week mandatory quarantine. And now this follows the return of nearly 300 nationals from Iraq last week, out of which 77 people tested positive. And so far, 3 dispatched South Korean workers at construction projects from Iraq have died from the coronavirus, and 2 are currently receiving treatment. After years of preparation, NASA has successfully launched a mission to Mars. The spacecraft-carrying rover named Perseverance was launched on Thursday from the United States. Our Lee Seung-jae with more.
NASA's next-generation Mars rover, Perseverance, blasted off Thursday from Florida's Cape Canaveral atop an Atlas V rocket. Its mission, searching for traces of past life on the red planet. NASA's night's journey to the Martian surface involves a next-generation robotic rover, a car-sized 6-wheeled scientific vehicle. After touching down inside the 45-kilometer-wide and 250-meter-deep Jezero crater in February 2021, Perseverance will hunt for signs of life, collecting samples for its future return to Earth. The Jezero crater, which was a lake 3.5 billion years ago, is believed by scientists to bear evidence of potential past microbial life on Mars. Scientists have long debated whether Mars, which was once a much more hospitable place than it is now, ever harbored life. Scientists believe Mars had lots of it on its surface billions of years ago, before the red planet became a harsh and desolate outpost as we know it to be now. As well as its search for past life, a 1.8-kilogram autonomous helicopter is also aboard Perseverance in order to conduct powered flights for the first time on the planet. Scientists say this will help helicopters someday serve as scouts on Mars and other distant worlds, helping mission controllers direct rovers to areas of scientific interest. As for when scientists can get their hands on some Mars samples, it'll be a long wait, as NASA believes the roughly 20 rock and soil samples will only be brought to Earth by 2031 at the earliest. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning. The rain has eased in many areas, but monsoon rain will continue for parts of 전라남도 and 경상남도 provinces through this afternoon with some heavy rain alerts expected. But when the rain lets up this afternoon in the south, a steamy heat wave will kick in with heat advisories already issued in many southern parts of the country, as well as parts of Gangwon-do province, that's including over in Gangneung, where highs will jump nearly 7 degrees higher today. Meanwhile, Seoul and Daejeon will reach 29 degrees Celsius, Daegu, Gyeongju at 34 degrees this afternoon. And there will be heavy passing showers in inland regions during the day today. Seoul is also forecast to see heavy rain after lunch, so have an umbrella handy. I mean, haven't we had enough rain already? Well, those of us in Seoul and the surrounding regions And the western parts of Gangwon-do province are very likely to see more monsoon rain through next week and possibly into the second week of August. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
And that does it for us at the hour, but we'll be back with more of the day's headlines coming up at noon Korea time, so do stay close. As always, thank you for watching and goodbye.